Week 9 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few defense DST units I looked at on the wire this week. The first one, the Miami Dolphins. So right here, I know the Dolphins had a great matchup on paper in Week 8 here versus at the Detroit Lions. They give up the 4th most fantasy points to defenses on the season, but right now, this Lion team, it's just been lapses for them. But Week 9, they go to Chicago. I know Justin Fields has been playing better, but I think Miami could make a few plays in this ball game. We've seen Fields turn the ball over a few times this season with the lack of receivers and him trying to do too much. So right now with the Bears giving up the 8th most fantasy points to defenses on the season, I think Miami could overcome that type of shootout ball game they had with Detroit and play better at the Chicago Bears here. So right now available in 57% of fantasy leagues. I give the Dolphins an ad this week. The next defense, the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs here. Right now, you could go out there on the waiver wire and get them if you want to just get them for a streaming defense next week. So the Chiefs available in 72% of fantasy leagues. And over the last couple weeks here, the defense in terms of holding opponents down for the most part has been playing better. But this is just a matchup-based type of ball game for me to go out there on the wire and get them versus the Tennessee Titans. I know Derrick Henry, he just came off a 200-plus yard rushing game. But besides Derrick Henry, there's nothing much in this offense. Obviously, Robert Woods, it's been a down year for him and a disappointment. Ryan Tannehill and Malik Willis aren't really going to make a difference. It's Derrick Henry a bust for this offense, and I think the Chiefs could try to take Derrick Henry out of it and try to win this ball game and make him one-dimensional by throwing the football. So right here, the Chiefs available, like I said, in 72% of fantasy leagues. And I would give them an ad this week, or you could even do it right now if you got a player on your bench that you're willing to drop. The next defense, the Cincinnati Bengals. So the Bengals here playing tonight on Monday Night Football, but their defense is a matchup-based type of defense, and they got a great matchup in Week 9 versus the Carolina Panthers, even though I know the Panthers have been playing better football of late in terms of scoring the football. But I know Cincinnati, their defense hasn't done much this season here, but like I said, for this matchup only, I like them, and they're available right now in 61% of fantasy leagues. P.J. Walker, I know he's looked good, but he's still an unproven quarterback. Doesn't have a lot of experience coming from the XFL to the NFL. I know he's in the Carolina system last year here, but I think this Cincinnati Bengal team, especially at home, can make a few plays on P.J. Walker and have a good ball game as a streaming option. The next defense, the Minnesota Vikings, available in 80% of fantasy leagues, and they're just a matchup-based type of defense as well. Here's Minnesota, and this is what you got to look for sometimes in fantasy football. That team that's going to be a good streaming option that they could get you 10, 15 points. And they got a good matchup at the Washington Commanders that give up the 5th most fantasy points to the DST. So the last couple weeks here, believe it or not, Minnesota's been pretty solid. Week 6 in Miami, 13 fantasy points, 16 points allowed, 6 sacks, 2 windows in fumble recovery. And Week 8 versus Arizona, 26 points allowed, 4 sacks in that one and 2 interceptions with a fumble recovery. So right here, Taylor Heineke, I know he's been playing good. I know he's been playing with grit. But I think this Viking team could once again cause a few turnovers here and have a decent ball game. And like I said, they're available in 80% of fantasy leagues. And the 5th and final defense I looked at on the wire this week's the Green Bay Packers. So the Packers, I know they came off another tough loss at the Buffalo Bills, but I thought that defense, even though they gave up 27 points, they at least tried hard in that game, made it a little tough for Allen. 27 points allowed, 2 sacks, and 2 interceptions, but they just couldn't get the job done. But right here, great matchup coming up in Week 9 at Detroit that gives up the 4th most fantasy points to DST's season. And something has to break now for this Packer team. They've lost 4 ball games in a row. Aaron Rodgers, I know, hasn't looked great. He's trying to build a rapport with his receivers. But right here at Detroit, I think everything gets going for this Packer team. And this Detroit team's been a punching bag for many seasons for Rodgers and the Packers. So right here, Packers defense available in 53% of fantasy leagues. They're still a team that has a shot for the playoffs, even though I know on the year they're 4-4. But they could get things right maybe here at Detroit is this Packer team. And like I said, this defense, they played a hard-fought game versus the Buffalo Bills, even though they fell short, obviously, and gave up 27 points. But they never gave up, and they made a few plays. So I think they could get on Jared Goff in this one, make a few plays. And they're desperate and due for a victory. So that's a few defense DST units I looked at on the waiver wire for Week 9 of the fantasy football season.